Um, so tonight we have one public comment item. Alice, are you still providing public comment or? Okay.
I'm Alice Hogan. I've met most of you. I know most of you, but I just wanted to say that I work with Navaja, Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance in Arlington, and I was invited next week to speak to the Tenant Landlord Commission. They asked me to come and tell about the organization and what we do to support tenants and housing in Arlington. So I have a business card if anybody wants to be in touch, and I just wanted to invite you all to come next week, which is next Wednesday night at 7. I don't know what floor they meet on, second floor. Well, I don't know, but anyway, we can find that. But if you wanted to come and hear more about the organization, and it's also hybrid, so you could call in. So I just wanted to let you know. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Next item is approval of minutes. Any changes to the minutes from last meeting?
Move the minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay, any objection? Hearing none, they are approved. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Goodwill, AHIP, and home information item.
So I will start with that and then pass it over to the AHC and Goodwill team. Okay, so the Goodwill redevelopment project, which some of you are already familiar with, as we did hear it as a site plan last year, but we are here today as an information item for a AHIP and home allocation. So I'm just going to run over the project really quickly and then hand it over to David. So AHC is requesting about $12.5 million in both AHIP and home to assist with this development. It will be, and one note on that is that that number is in flux. There are a lot of underwriting factors still going on. So that is the current request. But there will be 128 CAFs serving incomes between 30 and 60% AMI. Right now, there is one building on the site, which is the Goodwill building. It's used for the retail store and donation center. So the location is right off Arlington Boulevard, where that off-ramp is in South Glebe. I think most of you are familiar with the site. So a little background on all of this. So in January of 2024, the Housing Division released a request for letters of intent for developers to submit project proposals to utilize federal funds specifically. Several LOIs were submitted and the Goodwill project was selected to continue negotiations with staff. Since then, as I already mentioned, there was a site plan approval in February of 2024. And then last summer, they won 9% competitive tax credits as well as the state housing opportunity tax credit to secure that financing. So quick look at the affordable housing program, 100% affordable project, 120 affordable units, 94 of those are family sized. As you can see, a lot of units at very low incomes, 15 CAFs at 30% AMI, 22 CAFs at 50. So that is the housing program that David can share more on later. And then just a quick look at the timeline. So actually not on the timeline, we were at SIDSAC last night and got approval from SIDSAC last night unanimously to allocate the home funding. They oversee the federal funds, SIDSAC does. And then in spring 2025, so in May, the Housing Commission and County Board action on the AHIP and home allocations. So we'll come back to this commission for an action item then. And then looking into the future, fall 2025, financing, closing, and beginning construction with construction completion in the winter 27, early 28. So I will pass it over to David quickly.
Yes. Thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. I'm David Brotman with Affordable Homes and Communities, HC Inc. Development Manager over there. And Margaret, we met last night at the SIDSAC meeting. I'm joined by Jeff Cole, who is my counterpart at Goodwill Greater Washington. He's virtual up on the screen.
Good evening, everybody.
And also joined by my colleague, Michael Swisher here, who's representing our resident services program and team at AHC. So for the first slides, I'm actually going to start with Michael, just to give a bit about AHC, you know, our the way we approach housing. We've been, I guess, let me just say, first of all, we've been in Arlington for almost 50 years, over 8,400 units, and we have resident services on a lot of those units. That's part of our DNA. We're excited to be working on another new construction project in Arlington. So yeah, Michael will share a bit more about our resident services.
And I will say, you don't have to go into too much detail, because I do think
Okay.
we are pretty well versed in what AHC does, and I think we're already supportive of the project and on record as such for the site plan. So just, you guys don't have to go into exhaustive detail about all that stuff.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
So I kind of have one question. Are you guys like True Ground, excuse me.
Yeah, nonprofit. We're both nonprofit, private, affordable developers, owners, and have an internal resident services.
Yes, Joe, True Ground is like us.
That's right. Whatever.
AHC, the largest nonprofit affordable housing operator in the county.
We are.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of us thank AHC, so we don't have a public housing authority in Arlington.
Yeah,
So
that's how we
we're-
got started.
We're extremely thankful for what you do.
I wasn't around back then, but I guess I'll
1972, I think
accept
it
it.
was. So 1972.
75, 4, 70,
We never
We're
have.
going into our
Early
50th
70s.
anniversary year.
so 75 and beyond.
Okay, I made you guys.
And one of the things that makes us, that I believe helps us stand out, and I've only been with the organization for 9 months, but I've worked alongside the organization for 27 years in the county department, Parks and Rec and Human Services. So, and a county resident. So, but resident services really being there for residents with residents. And we have the 4 cornerstones. You can see we've got many youth programs. They're not at every site. Economic mobility, making sure people can stay where they are and or up and out should they get to that place. Health and wellness, so providing programming and fitness classes. Also includes food distribution, security. And then community building and engagement. My title is actually Director of Community Engagement, so that's my baby. But really, it's about building a sense of community. We have a property, and you want people to feel connected to their neighbors should they need support, or just to feel like I belong here. So that's really, I don't know.
That was great. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, so I think it to me, it's part of the reason I work with the organization that stands out, but it's the services to residents. Our CEO has said that anyone can build affordable housing. It's the support to residents that really makes us stand out. So.
Great. And we feel strongly about this project too, just because of our mission aligned partnership with Goodwill Greater Washington. We're both approaching the enrichment and transformation of people's lives. We're just doing it from different angles. They do it from economic and employment, education, empowerment, and we do it through housing and support services. So I'll get into the project. We know the site, but sort of the impetus for this is Goodwill Greater Washington's most popular, busiest donation site of all the properties they have in the area. And if you've been there on a Saturday, you'll know that they are busting at the seams. And so that was their biggest priority for this project was to get a better layout, get underground parking, and increase the size of their retail store and their donation processing center, as well as improve the circulation and experience for donation for donors. They also thought, what a great way to increase affordable housing in the county. And so that's when they issued an RFP, and they chose to partner with Affordable Homes and Communities for that. So we are co-developers in this venture. This is the approved site plan that we'll be constructing. You can see we're keeping the same circulation for donors to come in and around. We're just making it safer. It's covered. The donation drop-off area is covered. We've gotten rid of a curb cut. So now instead of 2 curb cuts, there's only 1, which is safer for pedestrians, less confusing for drivers. Here's a visual. It's a bit squinty eyes over here, but you can see just the multiple uses. We'll have retail store, donation processing center, 128 homes, apartment homes, and lobby, amenity space, fitness center, community room, as well as a child care center. The child care space is in the back, that light blue area over there, all under one roof. Yes.
So the distribution is still the long drive around and like
Correct. You can kind of see.
hard to see.
Yeah, Alex knows this by heart. Right. That now, instead of cars lining up on Glebe Road, they'll line up along the perimeter of the site. Yep, that driveway there. And there's actually a hole. See this next one. There's a hole that cuts through the building.
Okay.
Alan, can you point that out? There you go. There's a hole that cuts through the building, which is that white area on this aerial view. And you can actually, there's enough space for 4 cars to line up and drop off their donations all at the same time. So it'll be a much more efficient process. So here's the vertical building section view. You can see 2 floors of underground parking, 2 floors dedicated to the Goodwill project, Goodwill space, and then 5 floors of housing above. And so just to be clear, the home and AHIF request is just for the development of the housing. The Goodwill retail project is a separately owned, financed, legal project. Alex went into the unit mix, so I won't go deep on that. You can see we're spanning across affordability and unit sizes. That's a typical floor plan right there. And I won't read through all these, but just we're happy to hit all of these achievements here that we feel we're providing a first segment of the new Arlington Boulevard multi-use trail that is going to eventually run all the way along Arlington Boulevard. So we're that first stretch there, and we're improving traffic conditions and pedestrian safety. We envision the site as being one where Goodwill employees can live upstairs or send their children to the daycare on site. Residents who live upstairs can shop at Goodwill and send their children to the daycare on site. You know, we envision this as being a real sort of harmony, mixed use harmony right there. And I'll note also that with Goodwill increasing the size of their retail store and donation center, they are also increasing their staff size. So it creates employment opportunities too. And we'll finish off with some beautiful renderings here. So this is the view if you're driving on Route 50, Arlington Boulevard. You'll see the trail there. That's that stretch. And the daycare, the childcare is in the back on that ground floor, and the 5 floors of housing above. It's this angle, and this is from the front. There's that retail store frontage there. I'll end there and answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Alice, did you have public comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, congratulations and thank you for being so creative. I think one of the things we all know is that land is so spare here. And these more creative and cooperative efforts are really one of the only ways now that we're gonna get this kind of housing in these kind of numbers. So
Yeah,
we really feel like the combination of the 3 components is excellent, and to think that people living in this building or employed can have access to a low income, affordable daycare in the back is like icing on the cake. So just amazing. Thank
and
you.
thank you for your support throughout the whole process too.
What's the affordability period now for the cap units?
Well, our goal is always to keep it in perpetuity, as affordable as long as we can. And well, we have different funding, so I'm turning to
Yeah, it'll be 30 years for the extended use agreement with Virginia Housing. It'll be negotiated with the county, and it will be 99 years per our agreement.
Amazon. That's right.
Which I think will be a long hold. Yeah.
So we have Amazon funding their housing equity fund. They're investing in this deal.
Okay. And the county's AHIP requirements, you guys are still negotiating that?
Yeah.
Is that typically 99 years for AHIP or?
So it depends based on the deal. There are different numbers. The NOFA calls for, I believe, 60 years or more as highest points, but
I don't know if I don't want that.
yeah, but exactly. The deals are limited. Each one's very unique.
Okay.
At the risk of sounding like a history book, and I'm Alan Goldstein, I work with David and Michael, Bill's team. Alice, I remember when it was 30 years, and then it was 40 years, and then somebody said, we're sort of holding the strings here, let's make it 50 years. And this is the business that we're in, so it's not a question of what are the economics to get out. The challenge simply becomes, are we in a position to recapitalize the building so that we can invest in it to maintain it over time, rather than having the affordability sort of allow us to deteriorate. That's the balance we try to strike.
So once this is built, does Goodwill have anything to do with the housing, or they're like completely separate? Like AHC manages the housing, Goodwill manages their space.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I didn't speak on that. So Goodwill Greater Washington is they are part of the ownership structure in the housing components as well. And then they're obviously 100% owner of the Goodwill project. So we're long-term partners in this.
And there was no land costs here because they own the property.
We are doing a market rate value land cost.
But
It's a
Goodwill-
ground lease. It's a ground. There's no acquisition, but it's a ground lease. So we're entering into a long-term ground lease with. They want to retain ownership of their land.
Okay,
They should.
that's-
Yeah.
Other questions or feedback?
So you mentioned home funds. Are they at all in jeopardy of being cut by the federal government?
So, and Alice asked me this question earlier today.
And I ask them that every day.
So the home funds, they come, there are sufficient home funds to support the request. The home funds we are proposing consist of entitlement funding that has been contractually obligated to us in previous fiscal years. So it is money from fiscal year 22, 23, 24, 25 that federal government has contractually obligated to Arlington County. And so the money is there. We just have to pull it down and disperse it. But that said, obviously there are a lot of uncertainties at the federal level, and no one really has a crystal ball. But the funds have been allocated to Arlington.
Maybe drawn earlier then to make sure that they don't
So
disappear?
that is an extensive HUD process, and but that is something that the county is trying to work with AHC and Goodwill on to make sure.
that we can do that. This
We're
is not LIHTC, is it?
It is, yeah.
It is LIHTC, okay. And that shouldn't be interrupted by,
No, it should not be. The IRS is the federal entity that manages the tax credit program. But it's actually not. There's no funding that they're giving out. They're just foregoing tax revenue.
that's what I assumed. It
Yeah.
just, I don't know, depending on how many IRS staff they cut, if their ability to, but that's, we have no control over that.
Is home and LIHTC the same thing? Is that what
No.
you're saying? No.
Home is a HUD grant program, LIHTC is a tax credit program.
Oh,
It's
okay.
managed by the IRS.
Thank you.
Danny?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask if you had an anticipated close and delivery date. I live in Alcova Heights and my neighbors won't stop asking me about it.
That's right. Yeah, you emailed me. Fall of this year. So we're targeting sometime between September and November, depending on our first trust debt.
And
That's
delivery?
Yeah.
Do you know the
Delivery around the
construction
end of
timeline?
27 or beginning of 28.
Oh, yes.
Got it. Thanks.
So does Goodwill have their replacement on Langston Boulevard and George Mason? That is
I'll let Jeff Cole answer that question.
Yeah, so that is open. We call that a donation express, and that's been open for a few months now. And we also have a donation trailer that we just recently placed on Wilson Boulevard in the Clarendon area. And we are looking for other places where we could potentially put short-term donation acceptance locations while Glebe Road is down for construction.
well, the Express is my own neighborhood and I finally used it, but I went in the store and they looked at me as though I was crazy and they go, oh, I forgot to use the drive to do it. But
Right.
it's a great place, great Express.
Thank you.
Any other questions, feedback?
I'll just say just keeping in line with sort of federal chaos that's happening. The other thing we're tracking is how the tariffs are going to affect construction pricing. We don't have our construction contract locked in yet. We're too far away from closing, and so we're that's another factor that we're hoping does not increase too steadily.
Although unfortunately, your home funds are gonna be tied to Buy America, buy back the BABA or whatever, so.
Did we confirm that?
I think
We're
we're
okay with
we're
that.
good without that. Yeah, Caitlin is the federal compliance person, so I can check with her, but they're, yeah, I don't think that is going to apply for this project.
Okay,
They started hitting in 25, so.
great. Well, thank you. Appreciate the update about the project. Sounds good. And I think you guys are coming back. Okay.
May first.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Hopefully the federal government doesn't collapse in the meantime. But great project.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the fiscal year 2026 budget and a recommendation. So I know it says information item. It's quasi action item, because unfortunately, I had asked staff to come and answer questions and kind of present on the budget. And they like to wait until after the budget work session is done before they, feel more comfortable having those conversations once they get feedback and direction from the board. So they're planning to come to our March 27th meeting, which is weird that we have 2 March meetings this year, but I think the board moved up their April meeting, so we're meeting at the end of March. Thank you. But in the meantime, I'm going before the county board for the work session on Tuesday of next week to tell them what the Housing Commission thinks about the budget, So we have a couple different options. We could like vote to approve a letter tonight, with recommendations to the board on the budget, or we could sort of just come to agreement on like some general talking points that I'll use. And I'm happy to circulate that ahead of, the work session on Tuesday. So if people have, feedback or comments, we can do that. I'm thinking that probably makes the most sense. And then do the final letter at the end of the month after we've gotten the full presentation from staff. Even though that's a bit later than I would like to do that, but yeah, I think the key outcome for me is having a good sense from the commission what I should recommend to the board at the work session on Tuesday. So with that said, I sent out my draft analysis of the county budget. County staff were gracious enough to look through it and make sure that I didn't make any errors, or like mistake things. So happy to run through that with folks. And then I also did my draft recommendations to the county board at the end, and we can talk about those. We can talk about anything else that people would like to propose or discuss. But just starting with housing grants, and this becomes easier to do every year because I have the data from prior years to just fill in. So housing grants, it's a $2 million increase, essentially, or a little over $2 million, 2.5, from funding from FY25. Also funds one new position, and previously, like the manager also included a sort of like worst case scenario cuts that he doesn't recommend in the budget. And one of those was creating a wait list for the housing grant program, which currently there's no wait list. It's, if you qualify, you get access to it. So that's something that staff confirmed he's not proposing, but he listed in the budget as something the board could adopt if they were looking for further cuts. And it keeps the expanded housing grant eligibility category that was added last year for youth aging out of foster care. That was part of their expanded eligibility, like the housing grant review process. And it's still 40% of their income towards rent instead of 30%, despite the county board approving that in fiscal year 2022, but that was never actually implemented. Questions or thoughts on housing grants?
What was the background on that 30% to 40%?
It's a little confusing. So I've gotten different answers from different people, but the board, there was a push to, and I think the housing commission also supported that to bring it down to, 30%, because that's what housing choice vouchers were.
Right.
And so the board adopted that. I think the pushback came from the county manager saying, but you didn't allocate enough money for me to actually do that, which I'm not sure how it got to the point where the board approved it. I don't know how that mismatch happened. Like initially I was told, oh, it's an issue with our IT system. We can't, until we update the system, we can't make this change. But then I was told just flat out, there just wasn't enough money to do that.
So it's basically to make the money spread.
Yeah, 40%,
Make it new.
it allows them to help more households
Right.
versus 30%. It's just worse for that.
That's where that waiting list thing would have come into play.
Yeah.
If you lowered it to 30%.
The waiting list, would that trigger like this new position? Would the new position be funded before the?
So waiting list would be for new applicants for the program. So this position that the manager's proposing would, I think, go forward either way, unless the board like cuts it for some reason. But I think the wait list would, it wasn't clear like if he was saying, oh, okay, we're gonna cut the total amount available for housing grants and then we're gonna add a wait list. It was like a bullet that said, like, create a wait list for the housing grant program. So I don't know in great detail exactly what that meant.
Okay.
And staff, I didn't engage too much with DHS on it because they were like, he's not actually proposing that. He's just saying,
Oh,
if we need to, that's something we can do.
yeah, I guess it's just interesting to me, like they're proposing a new position, but then they're like, oh, we could add a wait list. It's, in my mind, that doesn't make sense.
Well, because it's,
Two different things.
this is what the manager thinks we should do. The wait list was, if the board comes back to me and says, you need to cut way more from everything, then he had, and that was one of like many cuts that he proposed, or things, measures that the board could take that would reduce
Okay.
spending.
Would the new, you know, if that new position is on the list too, then?
It was not specifically listed as like,
Oh,
don't do
okay.
that. I don't know, there wasn't a ton of detail around the like worst case scenario cuts, because I think he was like, I am just putting them out here as something we can talk about, but I'm not recommending these. I don't think we should do this. I just want you to know, like, if we need to go in this direction, here are some
Some
things we should look into.
Yeah, makes sense.
Then permanent supportive housing, so it's $3.4 million in local funding, for 5.3 million total. So this is, for those who aren't familiar, permanent supportive housing is like housing for, folks with like mental health, like challenges. And DHS oversees this, and is similar to like affordable housing, but there's a whole bunch of services that come with it. To help make sure that the individuals who are in permanent supportive housing are able to stay stably housed. So it could be substance abuse, it could be other, you know, mental health issues impacting those individuals. So they are, let's see, looking at slightly less units this year compared to last year that they're projecting. But this funding is relatively flat or slightly less than last year. Eviction prevention. So this number keeps going down. And if you look at the manager's budget, he talks about how like we hit a high point during COVID where this number was huge. And he's been trying to kind of stabilize it down. But the need is still there. There's still quite a bit of need for eviction prevention assistance. But as you can see, he's proposing less money this year, so 2.1 million instead of 2.3 million, and significantly less than the 4.6 and then the 5.4 for the previous fiscal years. And they're also adding a new eligibility requirement for households to receive this assistance. They have to at least have been in had their lease for 6 months prior to requesting assistance. That does not exist currently. So I don't know what the manager, what his target is for this, like what he wants it to be, like, you know, oh, this should be $1 million a year or something, what he thinks that like steady state should be. But every year in the budget, he talks about how this number, he hopes to have it go down over time. But the need, I mean, especially now we're looking at potential recession, economic collapse, and like, who knows? It could go way up. But another thing, like this money is set aside specifically for eviction prevention. You also have the county managers, essentially like his slush fund. I can't remember what it's actually called, like his, like
Discretionary.
something. Like he has a pot of money that the board gives him every year that he can, you know, oh, we need more eviction prevention money. Let me transfer 2 million from my anything fund to this. And then maybe contingency fund. Yeah, contingency fund. Slush fund.
Say 11 million.
I'm not. I didn't actually see what that was. Was that 11 million proposed? Yeah, and I think that is also for like legal challenges, the Trump administration, and like, you know, it's a whole lot of things. Then for AHIP, so AHIP is significantly less than last year. So 12.4 million instead of 21.4 million. So that's a big drop. And I think that is a result of it's a tough budget year. They're having to cut things. Revenues are not keeping pace with costs going up. And so this is an area in particular that you're seeing him propose less money. I will say, he proposes less money every year, and then the board tends to always increase this. I don't know if that's going to play out this year. But like last year, I don't remember how much he proposed, but it was a lot less than 21.4 million. And then the board was like, hey, let's get that up.
Are there projects in the pipeline that would need this?
You know, that is a great question. So Ann Venezia asked me the same question today because in my recommendation, I say like there's projects that I think could use AHIP money that may not get funded, but it depends on how you look at that. So I know, for instance, like AHC is trying to redevelop the Serrano properties. Right now, they're probably not considering AHIP because there's not money available for that. They're trying to get a deal with Amazon, like their housing equity fund. But if the money was available, would they probably try to avail themselves of it? I'm sure they would. And would it make it the deal move faster or whatever? Potentially. So I think it's tricky to answer that question because they're all looking at, and honestly, I think too, like the, why am I forgetting the name? They just came to us.
AHC.
The Goodwill site. Like, yeah, I think I asked them last year, are you guys planning to ask for AHIP? And they said no. But then AHIP was available, so they're asking for AHIP, right? Like, so I think it's, if there's money to be had and you're an affordable housing developer and you're looking at some sort of gap, like AHIP is a great way because it's 0% loan to address that financing gap.
So basically, you don't know.
Yes, that was a long way to say I don't know.
Wait, so Kellen, here it says on the paper that CPHD anticipates needing all available funds for pipeline projects like Barcroft, as well as existing projects with like expiring affordability. Is that still accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so what you're saying is if they only give 12 million, then like there will be no new projects that will be able to utilize AHIP.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just depends on how you classify what are the AHIP projects, right? Like if you exclude a bunch of stuff from it, then you're like, no, we have plenty of AHIP for the things that we plan to use it on. But if you look at everything that's possible, like, yeah, there's probably a lot more projects.
Okay.
But yeah, Ann Venezia did that, the language in the bullet points. So I have reasonable confidence that it's accurate. I don't think that there'll be a NOFA this year. Staff says they're going to evaluate whether or not, there will be, but I would be very surprised if there's. And again, because the NOFA is basically like, we have more money than we have projects, so let's open this up. I don't think that's going to be the case. Okay, Columbia Pike tax increment financing area. This one, I don't know if people want to talk about this. It kind of is what it is. I don't have any recommendations around it. It's just, it talks about the Barcroft, like debt servicing and, which is also part of the AHIP, as well. Then Office of Human Rights, looking at a slight increase, from FY25. I don't know what that increase is for. My guess is salary increases based on negotiated, was it bargaining?
Collective bargaining.
Yeah, collective bargaining agreements and things. Because I think there's a pretty significant pay raise included in this budget. Is that accurate, Alex?
I believe there's a 3.5% increase for county employees that are eligible. I don't know what eligible means exactly, but
My guess is that that's probably what that increase is.
They're not gonna hire somebody else?
What'd you say?
Are they gonna hire somebody else?
So there's 3 open positions. And those, like the money that they had last year included those open positions, as does the money this year. Like it assumes that they're filled. So yeah, there's also an $8,500 grant. I don't know from where or for what, but that was included in the budget for the Office of Human Rights. But it was so small that it wasn't really worth adding here. And I don't think they're planning to do fair housing testing. Well, they should if they're going to do it every 2 years. But whether that happens, because the fiscal year runs from July to the end of June, so that would happen in 2026. So if it happens in the first half of the year, then it should be in this budget. If it happens in the second half, then it could be in next year's. And that's typically around 50,000. It's been allocated in the past. I don't know what the Equal Rights Center costs to do it, and Gurjeet said she didn't have that data available for me. When I sent this to her. CAP inspections, this,
Our,
oh,
our
go ahead.
SAP thing, I guess, is just went by the wayside.
I think we should still shoot for it, like, until the Trump administration stops responding and fires all the staff responsible for that stuff,
But-
like.
Fair housing did get a hit, and that woman that,
It's here.
sort of,
Tracy.
whatever,
Tiffany.
from HUD, the HUD, in fact, I tried communicating with her because one of my colleagues actually hired her, whenever I knew her, so I was connecting with her, something happened. But, the reason why I said that, allocates X to fair housing, what is the X amount under the humans?
So that's typically
Enforcement,
the testing.
okay.
So they don't break out fair housing enforcement separately in their budget, although I would love to see what that would look like.
Yeah, but I think we should push for FAP primarily. If CFPB goes by the wayside, they're gonna be counting on state consumer laws to protect people. So I think it behooves us to push it.
I thought they already like fired all the people from HUD that were in the fair housing part.
They have not yet fired everyone. Like, they were planning to cut the fair housing equal opportunity by, or I think 73% staff cuts, and HUD overall 50%.
Because I thought the person that was in charge, I thought she was
A
retired.
lot of people took the
Died.
fork in the road, and like,
I'm gonna check culture.
yeah.
Tiffany
Johnson.
I think it was
Johnson, yeah.
Yeah, and I know for FIPS, which is the Fair Housing Initiative program, like Home of Virginia and Equal Rights Center, they just canceled half of all those contracts across. So, and I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason, they just said 50% of you no longer have contracts with HUD or cutting your funding. And so a lot of FIPS probably went out of business last week. Home still has funding. I assume Equal Rights Center does. I've not heard otherwise. I hope so, but yeah, but we don't know how much of that is going to get struck down in court, say like, oh, you can't do that. The money's been appropriated by Congress, right? We still have to wait for all those fights to play out, and see how much power the executive has to just do whatever the heck they want. But yeah, I agree, Joe, that and that's why for me, that was a big area of my recommendations. We need to ramp this up. CAP inspections, this has stayed the same, I think, since they started this funding line item. So 150K, continue inspecting CAP units, starting with like the older ones that were deemed by the county most in need. So that continues as an ongoing commitment. Homelessness services. So this, you can see, has sort of shot up. The manager's explanation is like it's an additional 2.5 million in ongoing funding to enhance case management and shelters, blah, blah, blah. So I also have been told that the county competitively rebid the shelter contracts, and the bids that they got back came in much higher than anything they've ever paid before. Essentially, it sounds like the county was underpaying their shelter providers for many years. And that now that they've competitively bid them, they're like, oh, this is the actual cost that it takes to manage these shelters and do these programs. I don't know if that's what this 2.5 million increase is, or if that's separate and also going to hit the budget, at some point. So I don't have a good answer on that. DHS basically said, we have a lot of updates that we're not ready to share with you yet. Stay tuned in March. We'll provide more information. But we're looking at, I look at this budget and I see There's absolutely no way we're gonna end homelessness in Arlington next year. Like, I don't see any way based off the resources that are proposed to meet that goal. And yeah, so, and I don't know specifically, DHS has not given me those numbers. Like, if you recall in December, I had asked, like, how many more CAP units do you need to end homelessness? How many more, like, housing grants or, like, temporary, like rental assistance, like, grants you need to actually fulfill the goals that you have in this plan? And I haven't gotten those numbers for them. So, and I don't know if I will. But that's kind of where things stand, I think, with homeless services. So we should find out a lot more at our second meeting this month. But, and during the work session as well, hopefully. But yeah, right now that's all the information I have. And then housing choice vouchers, the $30 million question. They don't know if the Trump administration is just going to axe this. They don't know if they're going to cut it back. They don't know what's going to happen. But this is a pretty huge dollar figure that if the Trump administration does cut it, that the county will have to figure out how do we make sure all these people don't become homeless, because they're all like 30% of AMI or below, and that would be really, really challenging.
This says vouchers will increase to 1,714. How many voucher holders with the federal program do we have right now?
I would have to look. The dashboard should have it, the affordable housing dashboard, but yeah, I don't have that.
Okay.
I'm looking it up right now.
Do you think, I mean, does the county sound like they would be willing to step in and kind of replace them?
35.
Thank
For FY 20.
I mean, I think the county does not plan to just say, sorry, like 1,700 people, you're homeless now.
Yeah.
I think they would want to. I don't know what they would have to do to meet that gap. I think it was like total federal funding was what, $80 million? I think that's what the manager had said in the budget. And this is a huge chunk of that. This is actually like, yeah.
So what happens,
Gonna find that.
what happens if they approve the budget and then like later on these things get cut? Because things are not getting cut.
Part of it is the contingency budget, and then they'll just change the budget. They'll just,
Have to,
yeah, like, okay, this major thing happened. Well, I guess we need to make adjustments to what we approved before. So Alice, what are you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that's really a lot of reason why the AHIP is so low. That's what I was told. They kind of took what that would have gone to AHIP and put it in this contingency, because between my immigration and housing, employment, there's so much that we don't know. And then they also have reserves, regular county reserves that are separate for the contingency. So how much of that they tap into, we don't know, but
They are increasing the reserve, or the manager's proposing to increase the reserves in this budget as well. So
Question, depending on how the rents are, like the fair market rents, could that, if we do see lower demand, could that also decrease that, and then we'd have to spend less per person, perhaps? I mean,
that's
some.
not going down.
I
I'm not, I don't know, I'm just saying if
They're not.
it's not going up as projected, or certain factors could, there, I don't know what, I'm just saying it could.
No, it's a good question. I'm trying to think if the dollars are tied to head counts versus like,
The HCV is budget authority, so it's dollars.
so it's total dollars.
It's total
not, like,
dollars.
individuals.
Correct. They equate it to this amount of money is likely to buy you X amount of vouchers, but it's not the other way around. So HUD allocates a certain amount of budget authority to your HCV program.
So I guess,
So that 29 million,
yeah,
that's what they allocate,
Okay.
not so many to 1714. So if the 1714 goes, whether that goes up or down, that doesn't matter. It's the 29 point, you still get the 29.3.
so Jason, I think to your point, like, yes, if the fair market rents did go down, you potentially could serve more people with the.
Yes, if they go up, you serve less people.
Right.
And also the budget, I think, how long the term of the contract is? Are they annual or are they 5 years?
They're annual.
They are annual?
Yeah, those ones are, yes.
I know like the folks receiving vouchers, like they have a long tenure. Like they tend to not leave the program like, quickly. Like once you get it, most of those
Yeah,
people.
you can stay in,
Yeah.
in perpetuity till you die, if you, yes.
A downside of the program, it's not great at economic mobility, but it's really good at making sure people have a home and don't become homeless. The county is also doing a housing choice voucher strategy, like strategic planning process, which I thought was kind of funny. I participated in like a focus group for it, but I was, they were talking about like what should we do, and I was like, I mean, how much flexibility do we really have here with this like federal program? And I was like, also, again, this program is really good at preventing homelessness. It is not really good at economic mobility, unless what the
They do have
Chetty research about like basically if you're under 8 years old and you're in a family receiving a voucher, then your economic mobility goes way up. But if you're over 8 years old, then there's really no statistical like change in your outlook for moving up income class.
Well, don't you have to be under a certain income level to receive it? So aren't people like,
Yes.
trying not to make more money?
Yes, which is, I don't know if they've done HUD has talked about over the years making it so it's not an annual like income check. It's like check it every 3 years or something, and so that they give people a little bit of runway. I don't know if they've ever implemented that, but I know that's been a recommendation that's been floating around for years. But yeah, that's part of the challenge as well. That like as soon as you make more money, you get kicked out of the program, but you're probably in that point where as you've lost federal benefits, you're not making enough money to make up for all the benefits you've lost. So you're actually doing worse off, even though you're making more money.
But I will say the Trump administration is proposing time limits and work requirements.
I do think this is the extremely low income people.
Yeah.
Most of them probably do not have the potential to make the kind of money that would pop them way out of the program, like you said. So it is really like a safety net for formerly homeless,
People with
disabled
a large,
people,
a large percentage are on fixed income social security.
right, SSDI, very
Yes,
low.
yes.
There's not probably too huge of a percentage that would have that potential anyway. But I just wanted to mention that it just came out today. We were in that focus group that they have a housing choice voucher survey that maybe you could share it. I don't know, Alex, with the commission, but I just received it today and it's only open until March 18th. So it's asking for feedback about, and the reason they're doing it, which like, what a weird time, right? We don't even know if this program will exist, but it's mandated every 5 years by HUD. So ironically, so it's weird timing, but that's why they have to do it. So, and when I went to my focus group, they were talking about like, maybe like compartmentalizing different types of like subgrouping of the vouchers to be used in different ways and kind of trying to figure out if they could tailor the needs of the community by kind of grouping them differently than everybody the same way. And there are pros and cons. So if you're interested, you take a
Because
look.
you can project base up to a certain percentage of your vouchers, and that may be what Arlington is thinking about. Because what that does is it locks them down.
Yeah.
So
I have many thoughts on project versus like tenant-based vouchers. But,
yeah.
Not germane to this discussion, but yeah, lots to think about here. But we don't at this point have much control over what the Trump administration decides to do, or Congress, I guess, maybe is a factor.
Maybe
Housing choice vouchers. Sorry.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If the president can do what he wishes with the money, then what's the point of Congress?
Unified executive, right?
The burning question.
Yep.
So looking at recommendations, again, these are the things that I would use for talking points for the work session, which will be DHS, CPHD, and Office of Human Rights, per my request, will also be represented there for the first time, which will be cool. Because their fair housing piece is an important part of the housing equation in Arlington. So the first recommendation I had is one that we have every year, which is more AHIF. Last year, I think we asked for 30 million. And we typically always ask for more than what the board does. I've talked to some housing advocates who've said, I would just support what the county, is proposing, which is the 12 point whatever million, because it's a tough budget year. They need maximum flexibility. We're typically the only commission who recommends more AHIP funding. We're kind of the only commission who usually does any advocacy around or advising around AHIP. So I put that question to you all. I'm leaning towards, I think we should ask for more. I don't know if 21 million is the right amount, or if it's 18 million or 15 million or I think it probably shouldn't be more than 21 million, but thoughts from commissioners on what you all think.
Ones that are advising or us to not ask for more, did they go with they just said because it's a tough budget year and they need flexibility? Was there anything else?
Mainly, I mean, I think, I think some folks are sort of looking at it as this is probably the best the county can do this year. So asking for more, what's the point? And and also looking as like 12.4 million is pretty good for a year like this. So I think that's kind of where some of that thinking is coming from.
Thanks.
I think I understand it's a tough budget year and, they need that discretionary fund, but also, not being able to have any new projects, it's not going to help us, in the future too. But I was also wondering if we could ask Alice her opinion.
We can.
Do you have an opinion on
I'm a little torn also.
Yeah.
I'm more in the camp of, I'm grateful we're having 12.4 in a year like this. And I understand that what I've been told is that kind of that differential is over in the contingency. And in my mind, I'm feeling like this is a little bit like COVID year, like we do not know what's coming. So the county's already stretched by 25 million. They don't want to stretch that much further. If there's any place to get like a little fund, which the government isn't going to give us this time, what if the housing choice voucher goes away? We need something when people could be, many people could be homeless like this, so I think that's where they're going. I think we talked earlier too, the idea of possibly, sometimes at the last minute money is found. And so it might be worth saying something, if there is anything, except, that you haven't yet designated, they know we need. And I don't know, the other last thing I would say is that when I've talked to staff, I'm hearing like the 12 million plus whatever's in there and all their calculations are kind of going to cover what's in the immediate pipeline now. So I don't think not getting more at this moment would halt anything current, but there are projects that want to move, and those may not be able to move for a year. I mean, and the funny thing is, I'm usually the one who's like all in for every amount of AHIP, but I just do feel like it's very tenuous right now. So I'm not happy, but I'm okay.
I mean, the other question to consider too is out of all the funding areas that we talked about, that's like county money, like housing grants, permanent supportive housing, eviction prevention, homelessness services. If we're asking for more money, is AHIP the place that we think you need more money, or is it eviction prevention, or is it one or the other?
That's what I'm looking at. Where do we get the biggest bang for the buck between housing grants and then we just saw the AHC people come in with their, where do we get the biggest bang for the Goodwills and the Melvilles and stuff like that?
I mean, to me, AHIP, like producing more supply is gonna be your most cost effective, like, thing, because housing grants, you can keep adding more money. It doesn't fix the problem, right? It just helps people deal with high costs. But if you get more CAF units, that's more of like a permanent solution.
So you answered my question. I think all of these people ran on supply and all that stuff. So why don't we try and give them some backing and at least go with a higher figure on the AHIP?
My perspective is I'm fine with that, but also, there's any year where there's gonna be more people who need the immediate assistance. It's this year. So I do think the programs, housing grant and eviction prevention in particular will be important. I also will say the county spends money on lots of important things. I'm not sure all of those things are as essential as housing is. So I personally, despite this being a difficult budget year, don't have a problem recommending some higher funding for some of these options.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we need to emphasize, or if you can emphasize with them that like housing is the most basic need that everything else builds on. So if there's anything to emphasize, well, yeah, if there's anything to emphasize in a tough time like this that a lot of people are struggling, like housing.
Housing first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, just about, as a commission, all the other commissions are gonna be like, for like the libraries, they're gonna be like, oh, we need to keep staffing, like you can't cut for like, it's like, okay, like, yeah, cutting like a person from library staff is, okay, you won't be able to go library for an extra hour on Sunday or whatever. Right. Versus like, oh, we're gonna cut, gosh, that's 5 people in a home, so it's like, yeah, I do lean towards, we need to advocate for mission with our mission, because we're in essence battling, I guess, those other priorities, and it's like we gotta, even if there is internal, like obviously different priorities within that we have to balance. It's like there's no win, but
I think we're kind of all saying, sir.
Yeah, so is 21 million the right amount to ask for aid?
We don't have anything in here on eviction.
What'd you say?
No, go ahead.
We have to. Or can we just say
So if we say more,
higher than the 12.5?
The higher you go, the more they can cut.
it is easier for them to ignore us if we don't give them a number. In my experience, like if you just say more funding for that, and that's why like I don't really like my recommendation around the homelessness services, because there's no dollars associated with any of it. So if I just say, more support for this, more support for that, and they're like, okay, well, until staff gives me a dollar figure,
yeah,
there's no action to take. So if we say 21 million, that's something for them to respond to. And so I like having specific dollars because I think it's more actionable that way. And then they can react and say, well, 21 million is too high. I think 18 million is good, but it gives them a place to go.
Okay, so for AHIP, since 21 million was what was last year, just let's ask for it again. We're level funding.
Yep.
Right? That's the bullet. We're level funding. We know things are tough. We're level.
Dollar amounts on anything else though,
Dollar amounts for,
like eviction fund, any recommendations for dollar amounts?
yeah. I mean, that is not what I wanted, but that is trying to get that information from staff is challenging, like to know. So like specifically for the the Office of Human Rights, I think doing a like marketing campaign is incredibly important to remind all the businesses and organizations that I don't care what the Trump administration says. If you start, like if you're a landlord and you say, oh, this person's transgender, I'm not going to rent to you, that's still illegal and it's still a crime and there's punishment that you're going to face because of that. In addition to going out to, all the residents in the county and saying, if you live and work here, you're still protected. It doesn't matter what Trump says. But I don't know how much that's going to cost. And unless I have staff come back and say, hey, we've run the cost estimate and this is what it is, I don't feel comfortable saying 100K. But I would love to be able to put a dollar figure around that, but I just don't have that. Whereas AHIF, I can add a dollar figure, because it's just adding money to a fund. But and same thing like for the Office of Human Rights. I don't know if after they fill the 3 vacant positions, if they'll have the capacity they need to do what we're asking them to step up enforcement. Because I haven't really been able to engage enough with staff to figure that out. So I don't want to say add one more person because maybe they don't need one more person. Maybe they just need to hire the people who like have already been slated to work there and then do a marketing campaign on top of that. And they could use consultants or something for that. So, but yeah, ideally I would love to be able to say, here's a dollar figure associated with each of these recommendations. But I don't have that information to actually recommend.
That's so cool.
So in the work session, are you gonna talk about the marketing campaign? Because I think that's a really good, like, tangible thing that they can picture, like, this is why we need the funding.
Yes. Did I not actually write that? Okay. I think that after I wrote this, my thinking evolved in it specifically what would I ask for? Because I was like, is it staff? I was like, I don't know if it's staff. Like, it's making sure they have the capacity to do the enforcement, but marketing, I think, is a really important piece. So yes, I can make sure I talk about that.
So based on what Alice said, we have language here that staffs are at risk of not having agents.
So
Is that true?
that language needs to change. So I think it's like that statement should be, that was true last year. This year, I think it should be more like there could be like there are other projects that could be considered that may not get funding, without an increase in data funding. Because that's, and Benicia actually flagged that for me. She was like, do you know specific things? I was like, well, I know Serrano, like I know potential other things, but like she was like, if you want to make that a little broader, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
I guess to Zach's point, like I'm reading this on my phone, so it's a little hard to see, but I don't think there's anything in here specifically about eviction, and I do think it's, a little concerning that that's going down when so many people are losing jobs.
So like
don't know what's
increasing the money for eviction prevention. We can add that if people want. The one thing about that is I know the manager's contingency fund has gone to that before, like very easily. So if that like 2.1 million goes in like 3 months, he's gonna tap into his contingency fund to like plus it up. So that's the only reason why I'm like
That's fine.
less concerned, because I know in the past they've just very quickly used that for it.
Okay.
Good to know. Yeah, I was just looking at the data, like, about eviction filings in Arlington over the last few years, and it's like definitely not going down.
Yeah.
Like it was low in like 2021 because of the funds, but then immediately went up back to where it was in 2020, like or before. So
I mean, we could say something like be prepared to use the contingency funds or add funding to eviction prevention if needed. If you guys want us to do that. Okay.
right, because I mean the contingency funds could be used for anything, right? They're not earmarked for housing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'd hope that they would actually use that for some of these housing vouchers and eviction.
And then in your human rights marketing language, I don't know if there's anything you add about ICE protection, knowing your rights around.
But they just the Arlington Reading Foundation, right?
So yeah, I mean, the county gave what 250K to the Arlington Community Foundation,
Which went to 2 organizations,
Legal Aid Justice Center and
Just Neighbors,
Just Neighbors.
to
Yeah.
do just that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know the county is they're trying to keep it under wraps,
It's very,
which I don't know.
Wait. Yeah. Sorry about that.
I know it- I mean, I don't know.
Up here.
It's an exclusive story about it.
Oh. Okay.
they did it sort of.
Private,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, the county doesn't want to become a target of the Trump administration, which
It's already becoming.
Good luck with that.
not
Yeah.
that I think is the right one right now, but I'm not on the county board. And I think it does a disservice when you're not willing to stand up and publicly like support all the different, marginalized groups in your community. But again, I'm not on the
For
board.
these other 2, very good.
But, yeah, and Office of Human Rights they don't have anything to do with the immigration enforcement piece. So it would only be like marketing around, housing, employment, public accommodation, and then education, like discrimination. Which I know we're just focused on the fair housing piece of it, but I think there's a whole lot more because, so we already know, and I put here. So HUD has already said, like policy wise, they're no longer enforcing gender identity fair housing claims. They have not publicly said, but they've started rejecting fair housing claims based on sexual orientation. So they're no longer enforcing both of those. And they're planning to cut the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity by close to 80%. So I would imagine pretty much every other case, who's going to get any fair housing enforcement done if that actually happens. And the state is likely going to get overwhelmed, and they're already struggling. And you have the Fair Housing Board, I'm told, at the state level that takes a really, really conservative view of like finding cause to basically reduce the caseload for the state. So they have a really high bar to find cause because they're like, we want to keep the caseload down because we don't have enough money and funding, and the Attorney General's office doesn't have enough people to handle this. So they just find a lot of no causes, which is not great, not how that's supposed to work. So that sort of leaves Arlington to handle all the fair housing cases. And right now we're short-staffed and not focusing on fair housing.
Short-staffed.
Hopefully, yes.
It's a lot of time.
Those people that got mud.
So
Yeah, so that's kind of my thinking around the Office of Human Rights, is that you have the Trump administration, who we just know is not going to enforce certain aspects of fair housing law.
Right.
It's going to struggle to enforce the rest of it, and then the state's going to become overwhelmed, and then that leaves us. On the homelessness side, this is the exact same recommendation we had last year. Like I said, I really wish it was more specific and that we had dollar figures and we could say, we need this many more rental subsidies, or we need this many more, permanent supportive housing to make this happen. I don't have those numbers, and have been unable to get them. But maybe we can put it in our letter. Maybe DHS will have that by the end of this month for us. But we don't have it now.
But on the homelessness, okay, so the 4.9 was FY 25 and the 6.8 is what's in the manager's 26 budget. Is that it?
4.9, yeah, it was FY 25, 6.8 is the current one. Yep.
So that's what the county manager has in the budget. So if we wanted to make a statement, we could say, 10 million.
Maybe, but one of the things that DHS made very clear in December was we don't just want more homeless funding, like we need more CAFs. Like you can't solve homelessness without having a place for them to go.
Well, that gets back to my other thing. I think we should be looking at our workhorses on this thing and put those at the higher level. And that will help, in certain cases, it's going to help some of the board members that want to up the ante. They ran on that as a platform.
Yeah. Well, and what I wish to, and this is,
And we already got our tax increases. I mean, our taxes are going up. We already know that.
Assess value.
Huh?
They assess value, so.
No, but also the
They've
rate.
advertised it in advance.
I don't think they're gonna raise it. I mean, from,
Assessment.
yeah, I would be surprised, but, I think one of my frustrations with how, no offense to the county staff in the room, is how county staff do their planning is they will do things like the homelessness, the plan to end homelessness, or the fair housing plan, or many things, and there's never a dollar figure attached to it. And we don't have estimates to actually make this plan happen and be successful. This is how much we think it will cost. So we have these amazing plans that all of us contribute to and we, oh, this should be added to it. It's like, great. And then when we don't meet it, or the affordable housing master plan, you look back and you say, well, was there no cost estimate that came with this that said, well, in order to meet the affordable housing master plan, you're gonna have to spend at least $30 million every year on AHIP. But that doesn't happen. And I think it should, because then maybe the board would take a second look before they approve the plan and say, well, actually, can we really commit to that? Or should we change the goals? Yeah.
Just a kind of sidebar comment, like affiliated with that. So I think a lot of these times you can't necessarily tie a dollar figure, like, oh, if we spend this amount of money, there's no homelessness. Like, it's like kind of saying, so like, we're about to go into our comprehensive plan, right? That looks how Arlington is shaped in terms of like, what's a transit core, what's not, that sort of thing. It's like, that also plays into it, because if we say, let's say we do a comprehensive plan and we say, we are gonna be, like, let's say that Arlington is now, we want to keep kind of doing what we're doing. Like, then the budget side of things, it becomes like you can't really do it. So it's like affordable housing master plan. Yes, you can do it with certain budgetary, but that also requires certain land use, other long-term planning strategies to make that happen. It's like if you're not willing to do unlock certain zonings or do feasibilities for certain development, then it's gonna be possible, right? So it's like I think that's like a dual mission.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with you. I just think, and again, it's an estimate. I don't think they should be committing to like, if we're doing this, then we are saying it will cost us this much going forward. But just have that information so you have a sense of, as of right now, when we adopt this plan, we think it will likely cost this, so that groups like ours don't have to keep going back to the board and say, hey, you know how you approved this plan? Your budget is nowhere near, where it needs to be to actually make that happen. And they're like, well, staff is proposing. I'm like, okay, but again, like, there's a huge gulf between these. And you have to address that. And it's frustrating when the board seems surprised by that information.
I think they seem surprised, but it's also, I think, it's like even like to get to net zero things for certain, it's like, we know it's not feasible if we don't do certain actions, but like, I mean, I'm not saying it's like ambiguous on purpose, but I think there's some saying like, we recognize it's not gonna happen, but not saying I agree with that, but it's just.
Yeah, no, it's very complex, and I understand why it is the way it is. It's just also frustrating when you get really excited about a new plan and strategy, and then budget season comes around and you're like, oh, we're not even trying to meet this. Like, yeah.
When is the next comprehensive plan happening?
They're starting it now, right?
Yeah, it's just got started up. I'm not sure the exact timeline, but I can find it pretty quick.
I would imagine they're coming to us at some point about that, right?
I have not spoken to anyone about that yet, but possibly. I'm not very into that process, but I can find out more.
And the other question I have is, can we, like, Kellen, when is the work session that you're speaking at?
Tuesday,
In case we want
March
to
11th.
watch. What time?
At 1 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and this year they were trying to like not let us speak at it to make it go faster, but I'm told that commissioners doesn't speak at it 1 to 4 p.m. on Tuesday the 11th. Yeah, they wanted written comments this year, but it's like, why am I gonna go attend this meeting in person just so I can't say anything? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, and then we also have the fund the study of rent stabilization based on our our resolution sent to the county board in November. I still think they should do that. I'm not super optimistic that they'll do that this year, but I think it should be included since we've already committed, ourselves to asking them for that. Anything else? Any changes? Anything that you feel like you're missing?
Yeah, so just one thing to note, and this was discussed at the CPHD work session with the planning commission there, talking about filling the vacant, there's one vacant comprehensive planning position, that is scheduled to not be filled, cut in the budget. So, it seemed like the board wasn't too, the question was asked, can we like get people from the current planning to cross train and, just make that more efficient. But I think it could be worth it because it is, to add like one position that's, magnitudes of order less than asking for like $1 million, considering that, that one person could be leveraged to unlock a lot more affordable housing. We think about housing like the near term, okay, we need vouchers now, medium term, AHIF for like development, ready to go. And then think of like long term, like comprehensive planning and, GLUPs and all that sort of thing to unlock. So it's like, I think, it's important that we shift down, of course, to do the now and then the immediate, but I think it's also, I think give us some signal that like this is not the time to just abandon these comprehensive planning things because, time is money. And like, let's say if we delay comprehensive plan by like, let's say a year, like that's like a year of housing down the line that's unlocked. So, I mean, again, it's very hard to decision to where do we prioritize short, medium, long, but I think it's important that we still emphasize the long term is still important.
Thoughts on that planning position, if we want to also recommend they not cut that position?
Yeah, I mean,
It could be cheap to fill. I mean, I'm not saying cheap, but like the market is a employer's market, so you could probably get a good person.
I know that we also recommended that those two positions and then they didn't cut after we'd asked. I mean, I think it's worth asking.
It'll be harder this year based on the planning. I mean, based on the conversation, but I think it still could be worthwhile to say, hey, like keep this in mind.
Other thoughts on this? I'm kind of agnostic, so I'm looking to the rest of the commission.
I'm also not gonna, yeah.
I'm happy to mention it.
You just, I don't think it's like but I think we're not even, you don't say like necessarily say, even the position itself, but just we can't drop all long term because, if you focus on the money now on, I mean, it's hard because it's like, do you help one person now or 5 people in the future? Well, the one person now is going to be really angry that they're not being assisted, but then like.
It's a staff position on the planning committee.
Planning staff.
Planning
Yeah.
staff.
I'm I'm not at the more theoretical level of like.
Well, can we ask the county, like why they're thinking of cutting it? Like,
Good money.
like,
It's been vacant for more than a year, I think.
yeah.
Um, and it's part of the manager's proposed cuts. Is he's looking, I don't know how many positions, like 30 positions or something. 44 positions, okay, that he's proposing as one of the 44 that he.
And like what the impact would be, like, does this mean we don't do a East Falls Church plan for another year, or like, whatever?
I think it is the comp planning, you said, not the current planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, so site plans and everything like that falls into current planning, and then comp planning is much more down the line. It's those policy documents. So yeah, like Plan Langston Boulevard, Affordable Housing Master Plan.
So for example, the priorities, I'm just pulling it up.
While you're pulling that up, is the planning commission recommending this position not be cut?
Yeah, they always, I mean, they always tend to not they tend to keep positions that are like, they quote revenue generation, because the planning, when you like rezone a zone like thing, that's revenue for the county. So it's like, and obviously there is a point, you can't just keep hiring like, oh, if I just hire, then if that does work, you do hire 1,000 people because there's certain limits. But and the county, when they were the board members, when they were kind of, I guess, not pushing back, but they were asking like, is this really going to be the return on investment, right? Because advancing plans is sometimes you're staff limited, but other times you're like politically limited. Like, oh, we don't want to do this plan, so like back on. So I don't know. I think the manager, the county manager, was saying, yeah, based on how things were looking, they could still flex over, like a person to do, like they're gonna do a study about general land use, the GLUP study how GLUPs are done. They're gonna do, again, comprehensive planning, like phase one this year, like engagements type activities. I mean, again, it's hard to quantify, like you have a staff of, I think it's like 30 people in CPHD. It's like if you're missing one, can you make efficiencies? But I think it's still, even just say like, yeah, or you just mentioned, we agree with the planning commission again. This is, in terms of the funding, it's not really that much money compared to, like, it's not like $1 million we're looking at massive program. It's like, whatever the FTE is, 150,000 or whatever for the whole thing. So, hey, this is something that show we're invested in because, now is the time when you want to have the plans ready so that when the market conditions improved, you're ready to go. Like, imagine if we had Langston Boulevard planned out 2020, right? We could have had all these developments, but we did it during like the times when that were really good. We're seeing a lot of development, and then now we're kind of waiting for that to pick up. So it's like, I guess, like I said, with the time is money thing, the quicker you have a plan in, the more time you have to catch the good times to get things built versus if you don't have it, it just sits there and it's like, oh, we could have developed that during this nice period we had. So again, it's not a major critical thing, but I think it's just, it may be worth mentioning, not in the letter, but just the saying that, okay.
Yeah, no, I have it written down for talking points. And again, I'll share those with the commission before Tuesday for any feedback, and then we can finalize our letter after the March 27th meeting. Anything else?
Thanks for putting in the work to create this.
Really great, really great.
Thank you all. Okay, so next item on our agenda, development updates.
So there aren't,
Oh, and Alex, sorry.
Yeah.
Is Elena still on?
actually, I think she said she dropped.
Okay, well, I did want to mention, we have a new member of the Housing Commission. And Elena and Fiara. Yep. Who is Sarah's Rubalcava's sister. Was appointed last month, I believe. After our last meeting. So she wasn't able to join in person today. Otherwise, I would have remembered to announce it at the beginning. But even though she's not here, welcome to the commission. She was online. So I did just want to mention that. And I think we still have one other vacancy.
Yeah, there's one. So there aren't any development updates themselves. It's just the meetings, although there was one more added at like 6 p.m. today. Let me pull that up. Yeah, so the two meetings that we don't have covered, there's an SPRC, I guess next Monday, that would be. For 2500 Wilson, it's just down Wilson here. It's a current office building looking to redevelop.
Is that the Rhodes Tavern site?
No, that was the NSTA site plan.
This one is really close to here.
Yeah. And then there's a second one, which is called Ballston 1. And that is also a current, it's near the Ballston, kind of that pond, when you get off the highway there. That's an office. Yeah. That's an office building that they're going to demolish, keep the underground parking where it is, build a market rate development on top of it.
It's not the CACI.
No, it's, that one stays. It's right on the main road there.
Yeah. And that meeting is March 20th. So it's not up here because the email just went out at like 6 p.m. But so there's a meeting on March 10th and SPRC on March 20th as well.
I can possibly do the March 20th.
Do you have anyone for the March 10th?
Is it virtual or?
I think it can be, right?
Yeah, I think you're able to participate virtually. Just let me know by tomorrow if you do want to be on the March 10th one, because you might have to send an email to someone saying they're allowed to be on the roster, but
I mean, I can do it on Monday if it's virtual.
okay, well, let me check and.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, otherwise I
Better
can't.
to have someone virtual than not have anyone.
Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's it for development updates.
Okay, then we have subcommittee and liaison reports. Brian is not here. I can give a little bit of an update on the affordable housing ordinance working group. We have a date.
So there is a tentative date
Right.
of March 18th. We are trying to really kind of shore up the whole group before that. We do want, the market rate developers and everyone at the table for that first meeting. So assuming that the roster is finalized, it will be March 8th. If we can't get that done in time, it will go to April, and that'll be an April 15th meeting. I think it's the third Tuesday of the month is what we're gonna do for that one.
I know you've been sending emails about the task force. Have there been emails about that one? I don't think I've gotten any of those.
So not that have been going out to the group. It's
Okay.
actually behind the scenes, Brian
Okay.
trying to
Okay,
get people.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no information has gone out
Okay.
yet on that.
It's just been like invites, and like a big piece of it is reaching out to community members and to developers and organizations trying to figure out who can represent you and
Right.
like tell me about the commitment and all that stuff. So yeah, there's been a lot behind the scenes for this one as well as the task force.
But also on that, Russell Deneau Schrouder, who's come a few times to the commission, he's really the lead kind of policy expert in housing division. And he is going to work with me as kind of the subject matter expert on that working group going forward for the rest of the year.
Any other questions about that subcommittee? Excited for that to kick off. Appreciate all the hard work that Brian has been putting into that. Okay, community engagement task force.
Yeah, so thank you to the 5 of you who are on that. And for the flexibility with Alex rescheduling the first meeting. Hopefully, now that I know the process, won't have that issue again. But the first meeting should be on next Wednesday, March 12th at 7 p.m. virtually. And then after that, since that's does conflict with the tenant landlord commission schedule, then hopefully we would want to do the third Wednesday of the month after that. If everyone approves, we can talk about it at the first meeting. We've been reaching out to different people who might be good to be on it. So there's someone from the tenant landlord commission, someone from Bugata, and then I believe someone from AHC. They've agreed to be on it. Yeah, so Michael, but he just told me during the meeting, he was like, oh, I'm actually gonna,
Oh, okay.
we'll see. And then I know Karen
I have
found
somebody.
somebody from the economic development.
So from our agency. Yes, another person besides myself. Is it
Great.
okay, I guess, to have two people from the same,
Why not?
why not?
Well, you're there representing the commission, so.
Right, and they're representing the community
Yeah, I mean,
and the
great.
demographic people.
Great. And then we, in our first meeting, hopefully can talk about the work plan and just if, any other members that we want to be on it. Sound good?
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Katie, for all of your hard work to get that going, and also thank you, staff for supporting both of these to get them off the ground. I know it's especially complicated when they have members from other commissions and from the community and trying to coordinate all that. So, yeah, thank you to everyone for their hard work. Any update on tech?
Just that, met last night. And if you look in the budget, in the county budget, you'll see the results of this year's NOFA results. They approved, it's like about 1.2 billion, but I Okay, that 1.2 million in CDBG and CSBG funds for this round of these. I'll just note that there were 33 awards made, which is, and 14 that were not, which was a significantly higher level of non-awards than in the past, because this year there were decisions to actually be more discriminating and award slightly higher levels of funding. So take the pie and cut it a little to slightly fewer pieces, but slightly larger pieces. So there were seemingly maybe some unhappy nonprofits out there, because it sort of historically, at least since I've been on SIGTEX,
Rubber stamp.
a few years, but even I think beyond that, just about everybody, at least the 2 years previously, maybe there were 2 or 3 folks that didn't get funded. So this 14 being turned away was a significantly different case. So I think there were some unhappy folks, but that was a sort of philosophical decision or a change in philosophy and a decision to do larger, but perhaps not higher quality, have the scores more discriminatively and do it that way. So, so if anybody has an interest, take a look at the budget and see who's funded and what kinds of projects were funded. There were a number of new ones, so that's new, not new nonprofits necessarily, but new programs. So that was cool. And the county apparently passed its monitoring that we participated in, so that's great. So the state won't come back and monitor for another 3 years, so that's great too. And you all, I think, got notice of the tour that's next month that you'll be invited to come on and going to the Serrano, to Bugada, and getting the 3rd stop. But anyway, hope to see you all the April tour. So that's it.
Nice turnout. That saved the date. I do believe you do have to register, I think.
Yes, you do have to register because they want to make sure that there's enough seats on the bus and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And be there, it's at 6 o'clock.
Better be here.
And be there on time because
Otherwise-
you don't hold the bus.
Yeah, and why is it, it's a night tour and?
Yes,
And we're gonna be going where to?
it's to the Serrano, Bugada's ambassador program that's over at
Okay.
Buckingham, and I'm forgetting the 3rd.
Okay.
But these are all programs that are funded by CDBG funds.
And this is different.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're,
Yeah, this is the community
Look it up.
development bus tour, and
Yes.
in October we'll have the affordable housing bus tour.
Okay.
yes, yes. The reason I brought it particularly to our attention is, one, that the Housing Commission had been interested, but because the first stop is at the Serrano, which is of a
I
particular,
hope you guys have a
because,
Arlington.
Hmm?
I said, I hope you have a bus driver.
oh, no, I know, we got lost last year. And it made it longer, but
What they had was pretty good, actually.
because the fund tends to, almost every year, at least once we fund the resident service coordinators at some of the sites, and that's why the Serrano, so that's the Proj CDBG funded activity at the Serrano that is why we're going to Serrano. But it gives us an opportunity to go to the Serrano, and in fact, it was resident services. That was one of the issues because they weren't doing their job. So, okay.
And speaking of the Serrano, so Alex, I know AC is looking to redevelop, and they're trying to get like gap financing from Amazon. The county purchased the property, like I think in the front of the site for the firehouse. Do you know if there's gonna be an opportunity to weigh in on that property and like trying to advocate for affordable housing to also be developed with the firehouse?
That is not something I know the answer to, but I can ask Ann.
Okay, that would be helpful.
Do you want to have residential housing on the same site as a firehouse?
We've talked about it for like the Clarendon sector plan before, and there's a way to do it that it's not as disruptive, but it's just gonna be like, you either have affordable housing right behind it. Well, you will either way, and this is just also on top of it.
Oh, Alexandria actually has one. And then also there's market rate. I mean, it's like, so, I mean,
Only because I have lived right next to a firehouse in rental housing.
people pay a lot of money for the,
And I do not encourage it personally, but that's just been my experience, so that's all.
oh yeah, circular.
That's my own little personal experience. Maybe they build it better now.
Uh,
Okay, maybe that's better
for
installation.
EJ, LRB, any
Okay,
other?
so historic Alex wrote to them and never returned his call, so I'm gonna make a surprise visit. My name day, which is St. Joseph's Day, March 19th. I'll either go in person in this room or go on the virtual thing.
Okay, sounds good.
Stir the pot.
Thank you. Right.
And we still don't have it. Okay, TPD.
Yeah, so I know we had done that green building meeting back in December. I did reach back out to that team asking when the vote might happen, and they said late spring or early summer. So we, if we still want to like have them come back and talk to us again and write a letter before that, we do have another month or two. But I know Arlington passed that new like resolution or plan for climate. So hopefully they'll be like,
Yeah, that we're
Within
still
that.
willing to publicly say things about, but like the other stuff, I don't.
yeah, so we may want to add that as an agenda item in future meeting if people are interested.
Yeah, I mean, I have maintained, happy to invite them to come back. I saw your email and they were kind of like, oh, maybe. So
So what I've heard is that they do have to go out and kind of do another round. So that's gonna delay them a few months. But they are definitely coming back to commissions as part of that community engagement.
Okay, so it's already
we
built
will-
in.
Yeah.
Okay,
They're planning on coming back at some point. It's just unclear if that is like in July.
okay, great.
cool. Any other updates that we missed? That it passed? No, it passed.
Yay.
I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. Meeting quick. Joe, did you?
Yeah, this is a kind of a general statement. So we did Melwood, we have Goodwill, things like this, so innovative, and I just continue to say, and I don't know what the right vehicle is. If the county advertises it, someone's got to advertise these things, because I think the citizens who have mixed views on affordable housing and missing middle and all have to know what's being done. And I'm only saying this because I've lived in this county 45 years. I've been in housing at the federal level, dealt with every NIMBY and whatever. But the way to cure this is transparency. So I'll write something up more formally that we can maybe deal with this issue.
Okay, all right. Joe, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. See you later.
Great. Yeah.
And
Okay.